Anya Parampil is a journalist and the author of Corporate Coup, Venezuela and the End of the US Empire, and she joins us now from Washington, D.C. Anya, we've got a basic breakdown of the numbers from Venezuela's electoral commission. No details, though. To what extent is it possible to trust those results?
Well, Venezuela's actual process for voting is quite secure. I've witnessed it firsthand. It requires a physical photo ID, an electric scan of your fingerprint. You're then given a physical ballot that is dropped in a secure box and checked against the electronic tally. And then
what I'm asking is how much can we trust these results that we're getting from the Electoral Commission?
Well, we don't, as you mentioned, we don't have the actual detailed local polling station data at the moment because, according to Venezuela's constitution, they weren't required to immediately release that data. The opposition did go ahead and release their own data online. And since then, because of violence that broke out in the streets momentarily and kind of this sudden pressure campaign from the outside, the Venezuelan government made the call to turn all data, all individual polling site data collected by the individual parties over to the Supreme Court so that the Supreme Court can conduct an independent audit. The reason why I bring up the process of the vote is because that process is secure, it should, in theory, be quite simple for the Supreme Court or whatever authority is going to be reviewing this data to audit and give an accurate picture of the votes that came out. I think that's why countries such as Colombia and Brazil, while those leaders have paid rhetorical support to Maduro at the moment, haven't formally recognized his reelection because they want to see that data. But ultimately, I don't think that will change the mind of the opposition or the United States. And regardless, it will have little effect on the ground in Venezuela. That's all still up in the air. The numbers don't necessarily reflect the reality of how the U.S. is going to respond or how Venezuela will be governed.
Right. I suppose if the system is so secure, then there can be little quibbling with the numbers. Why not then just get on with it and release them and show everyone the details?
Well, I would ask the same question, and I would assume that those are the numbers that the Supreme Court now is going to look at and verify. But there is this continued trend. I mean, this isn't the first time that the opposition have called into question an election. They said beforehand that unless they won the vote, they wouldn't accept the result. And they've had violent street protests basically any time in 2014, in 2018, any time that they lose the vote, they're out there in the streets. And there's a long history of U.S. funding, State Department funding for these groups, including Maria Corina Machado.
Anya, I wonder if you mentioned sorry to interrupt you. I wonder, you mentioned the Supreme Court there. Can you explain a little bit more about what their role is going to be here? Because they've been asked, as you say, to look at these tallies, but many say that the Supreme Court itself is not a neutral institution, that it has been a government ally for many years now.
Yes, well, according to the Venezuelan constitution, the president and the executive branch does not actually appoint the Supreme Court. That's done by a panel of legislators and judiciary experts. The question of the Supreme Court's independence is a question that we hear repeated across the board, even in the United States. So, I mean, I agree that there are legitimate questions to raise about the fact that the local polling station data hasn't been released. But I also don't think that from the perspective of an American citizen that my government is necessarily concerned with democracy or voting at this moment. I mean, the Turkish people would know, for example, that the U.S. has a long history of meddling in the affairs of foreign countries, supporting non-government organizations and what have you. So that is the playbook that has been instituted in Venezuela for a long time, and ultimately recognizing the shadow government there, which the U.S. has already done. It doesn't matter who controls the borders and the military, the ministries, according to the U.S., because the interest here is actually to continue to freeze Venezuelan assets held in the U.S. and Europe, which have been frozen since 2019, so that the U.S. government and foreign corporations and banks can continue to basically feed off of that stolen money. This is a playbook that's been rolled out also against Russia and other countries that are targets of U.S. regime change policy.
Okay, Anya Parampil from Washington, D.C., thank you.